Welcome to the show. Today we're diving into a really interesting legal case.
Oh, that could be a good way.
And get this. Our only source is a motion to recuse the prosecutor.
Really?
Yeah, it's like we're getting a behind-the-scenes look at how a legal defense comes together, you know?
It's so fascinating. It's like you can really see how lawyers try to shape the narrative around a case.
Right, exactly. It's not just about the evidence or the charges. It's about,
The strategy.
yeah, it's about strategy, perception, all of that. So, okay, before we get too far into it, let's set the stage.
Okay.
What's this case about, and who are the players? Give us the rundown.
All right. So the case is City of Natchitoches versus Travis Hines.
Okay.
Hines they describe him as a homeless individual who travels and makes content for his YouTube channel.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And he's facing a charge of resisting an officer in Natchitoches, Louisiana.
Resisting an officer. And what does that mean in this specific situation?
So basically, it comes down to Heinze refusing to provide his name to police officers at a public library.
At a library.
At a library, yeah.
Okay.
And what makes it even more,
More complicated.
more complicated is this is not his first time in court for this charge.
Oh, really? So there's already been a trial.
Yeah, there was. He was initially convicted,
Oh.
but the Louisiana Third Circuit Court of Appeal overturned the verdict
Okay.
because it turned out he was denied his right to counsel during that first trial.
Wow. That's a pretty big deal. Denied his right to counsel.
Yeah, pretty significant.
So this motion comes into play as this retrial is, getting underway?
Exactly, you got it. Heinz's new lawyer filed this motion to have the current prosecutor, Cloyd Benjamin Jr., removed from the case.
Removed from the case, okay.
They argue that Benjamin has a personal interest in this case, and that's going to prevent the legal term, a fair and impartial administration of justice.
So the defense is saying essentially this prosecutor is biased.
Basically, yeah.
That's a serious claim to make. What evidence are they using to support that?
So they outline a pattern of behavior that they argue points to this bias. For example, from the get-go, Benjamin was hesitant to even give his email address.
Really?
For standard discovery purposes.
I thought providing contact info was, standard procedure in these cases.
You would think, right.
Yeah.
But the motion cites Benjamin as specifically saying, because of Heinz's online activities, he didn't want to, quote, have his office be bombarded by Heinz's, quote, people.
So right away, there's this sense that the prosecutor is attributing the actions of some of Heinz's YouTube followers to Heinz himself.
Exactly.
That seems, I don't know, that seems like it could be kind of
problematic.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and it's this idea of guilt by association that kind of becomes a recurring theme throughout the motion.
Okay.
They're saying that the prosecutor repeatedly attributes the negative actions of some YouTube commenters to Heinz directly.
Interesting. So they're saying he's responsible for what other people are saying about the case, essentially.
Yeah, that's what they're arguing.
Which, I mean, if that's true, that seems like a slippery slope. Where do you draw the line?
Right.
So it sounds like they're setting up this argument that the prosecutor had already formed an opinion about Heinz before even really, I don't know, looking into the case.
Yeah, that's the implication. And it doesn't stop there. They go on to detail more serious accusations.
What else does the motion say? What else does the motion say?
Well, they bring up the video evidence.
Okay.
They claim that Benjamin misrepresented the length and the content of these videos to the court.
How does that help? How does misrepresenting evidence help the prosecution's case?
Well, it doesn't necessarily help their case directly, but it did prevent Heinz from adequately preparing for trial. At least that's what they're arguing in the motion.
So they're saying it limited his ability to, defend himself properly.
Exactly. And that becomes a huge problem.
Yeah, of course.
In terms of fairness.
Right.
And, it's interesting because it's at this point where the motion transitions into talking about what they call disparate treatment.
Disparate treatment. Okay, what does that mean in this context?
It essentially means treating someone differently than others in a similar situation.
Okay.
So basically, they're arguing that Benjamin has handled other cases that are arguably more serious than Heinz's with more leniency.
Help me understand that. More serious. In what sense? Like, what are we comparing here?
Think charges involving violence or theft, even things like domestic abuse.
Okay.
The motion actually gives examples where defendants, in those cases, people accused of things that on the surface seem, arguably much more severe than refusing to give your name at a library, they received plea deals or fines or suspended sentences.
So they're saying these other defendants got let off easy?
Well, they're not saying that those other cases were mishandled or anything.
Okay.
They're just using them to draw a contrast,
Got it.
to highlight what they see as a discrepancy in how this particular prosecutor handles cases, with Hines easily bearing the brunt of a much stricter approach.
I see where they're going with this. It's like they're raising the question, why this defendant?
Exactly.
Why such a hard line in this case specifically?
They're trying to raise doubts.
Right.
Like, if you're willing to offer plea deals for assault or theft, why the different approach with Hines? What's going on here?
Yeah, because on the surface, refusing to give your name at a library doesn't seem like it's on the same level as, assault.
Right, and that's precisely the point they're trying to drive home, but it doesn't stop there.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah. The motion goes on to describe what they call inappropriate and, frankly, unprofessional behavior from the prosecutor.
Oh, okay, like what?
So they point to specific instances of what they call dismissive and sarcastic remarks made by Benjamin both in court and even in private conversations with the defense counsel.
Wow, okay, I have to admit, that's a side of courtroom proceedings I don't think we get to see very often.
Right.
Do you give me an example? Like, what kind of remarks are we talking about here?
Sure. So at one point, Hines mentioned that he has other YouTube channels besides the one that, focuses on his legal case.
Okay.
He mentioned one about, his travels. And in response, the motion says, Benjamin quipped, maybe you should go travel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see how that might rub someone the wrong way.
Yeah, and it gets worse. The motion claims that in a phone call with the defense, Benjamin allegedly admitted that he might have considered a different resolution earlier in the case if Hines hadn't made things so personal.
So it's like they're really leaning into this narrative that his personal feelings about Heinze are impacting how he's approaching this case.
Exactly, and it all kind of culminates in this motion to recuse.
Fascinating. We've got allegations of bias, procedural missteps, even a little bit of courtroom drama.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. I'm really curious to hear how they wrap all of this up.
So they go in for a really strong close.
Mm-hmm.
The motion says that any reasonable person looking at this whole situation would likely conclude that the prosecutor's actions are not,
Just him doing his job.
Right. They point to a personal interest in the case against Heinze.
So they're saying that there's something more going on here.
Yeah, their argument is that this personal interest may be stemming from Heinze's online activity.
Okay.
Makes it impossible for Benjamin to be impartial.
So what do they want the judge to do?
They want him recused. They're calling for a whole new prosecutor for the retrial.
Wow.
Someone who they argue can be more objective about the situation.
So someone whose personal feelings won't influence how they handle the case.
Exactly.
Because that's important, right? Making sure the process is fair and impartial.
Absolutely. And they really emphasize that it's not just about this one case they see. It's a compelling case study.
There's that bigger picture thinking you always bring to these deep dives. I love it.
Yeah.
So how do they connect those dots?
Well, they hit us with some pretty heavy questions, like, how much influence should a prosecutor have in the first place?
That's a big one. It's a lot of power to give someone right.
Absolutely. And this case really highlights what happens when that power is potentially misused.
Because if you're the defendant, it's got to feel like the deck is stacked against you if there's even a hint of personal bias, right?
Exactly. And that leads into another one of their big questions. What exactly counts as personal interest in a case?
Yeah, where do we draw the line? It can't just be knowing the defendant or the details of the case, right?
Where's that boundary?
This deep dive has really given me a lot to think about.
Me too. It's like we got this inside look at how the justice system works, with all its flaws and complexities.
Yeah, it makes you realize that behind every case, there's this whole backstory.
Absolutely. And it reminds us how important it is to keep having these conversations about fairness and impartiality in the legal system.
100%. Well, this deep dive was a wild ride. We covered so much ground today.
We really did.
Yeah.
From legal strategy to potential bias to ethical questions. It's amazing what you can learn from just one document.
That's the beauty of a good deep dive, right? We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time for another one.